Welcome to Empower Humans.
Welcome once again to the Empower Humans podcast. This is episode 52, my friends, and this episode is our one and only interview with the amazing Lisa Bilyeu. I've been looking forward to this, and I hope you have too. If you don't know who she is yet, look her up on social media at Lisa Bilyeu. That's B as in boy, Ilyeu, or at Women of Impact, both on Instagram. They have the Women of Impact YouTube channel, as well as the Women of Impact podcast. So look for all those things. Enjoy this interview. And I want to tell you, as always, you are priceless. You're worth more than all the riches in the world. The riches are in you, my friends, not in all the stuff around us, not in all the things that deceive and confuse us in this world. Make no mistake, the riches are in you. You are priceless, and you're never alone. Don't forget that. Reach out if you need help to us or your neighbors or whoever it might be. So many people are around who are available to assist and help if you need anything whatsoever, whatever that might be. So just remember, you are priceless and you're never alone. I didn't do a podcast here for another week or so. I was traveling. I got to go see some of my family in Minnesota. I have this whole branch of family there who I love dearly, but I haven't seen literally, and it's embarrassing to say this, but it's been over a quarter century since I've actually been out there when I was a kid. And I just got to go out there, got to see my grandma and grandpa. They're both in the range of about 90 years old. My grandma is 89, so she's still that earlier decade. And my grandpa's about 92 at the moment. They've been married about 72 years. If you do the math, they got married very young. And love the heck out of these people. Me and my grandma were balling at the end, and I don't mean playing basketball. We were both crying profusely when I left. I can't say enough about family and doing our best to maintain these relationships, keep them intact. And that's part of the reason that we're a little behind on a couple podcast episodes here, but this is worth the wait. So we have a build-up now to this one, and you can devour it 2 or 3 times because there's so much meat. Lisa Bilyeu gets into so much powerful information here about her journey, as well as ambition and our mindset and relationships, just tons and tons of stuff. So before we get into the interview also, I just want to challenge you, as always, study, keep studying if you have been, start studying if you haven't been, just keep learning, growing, progressing, just keep doing what you can, audiobooks, videos, go to the Women of Impact or Impact Theory with her husband, Tom Bilyeu. They built this Quest Nutrition company. We're going to talk about all that in the interview. And the second challenge, as always, is make great moments with your family, with your coworkers, with the people around you, with your animals, whoever it might be. Make great moments, surprise people, love people as a verb, actions, make great moments. That's where great moments come from, is our actions. So make those great moments. I make mistakes all the time. I'm trying to do my best, trying to make things the best they can be in our world and with relationships and so on. But do everything you can to make great moments. And last challenge, as always, let's keep doing this podcast together. Our podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/empowerhumans. Get a free audiobook. They offer that to our listeners. I've been talking to you about this book about Thomas Edison I've been listening to. I've listened to other things about there's an audiobook called Feeding the Starved Marriage and other things like that. Relationships, inventors. There's so many various things out there you can learn about. Go to audibletrial.com/empowerhumans. Get your audiobook. Start the process if you haven't yet. Besides that, we love you, our audience. Without further ado, here is our interview with the one and only Lisa Bilyeu. I am so excited to be here with the one and only Lisa Bilyeu, who I've been looking forward to doing this for a long, long time, Lisa. And here we are. Today's the day, and we're on Skype. So we're going to get going here. Now, are you in Los Angeles, by the way?
I am, yeah, and just want to say thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is a great privilege for us to have you, of all people, here with us. And I just love talking to people about helping people and lifting each other and lifting ourselves. We all go through things. You're doing a great deal of things with this Women of Impact and that whole thing tied into a lot of the stuff that your husband does, this impact theory, right? What is the impact theory, by the way? I mean, he has a podcast and kind of a video series with that, doesn't he?
Yeah, so we, after having built Quest Nutrition, we really felt like it was massively impactful on people for the body. And if your mind was right and you're able to get up and eat healthy and go to the gym, it was fantastic. But we very quickly realized that what about the people that suffer from depression and anxiety, that can't get out of bed every day? And we realized that real, true health actually meant taking care of both the body and the mind. And we were very fortunate with the success of Quest Nutrition, but we just looked at each other and said, like, what's like, no BS. If we really, really do want to help people, then we have to address the mind. And right now we're not doing that. So we actually had started a interview show within the company of Quest Nutrition, where my husband was interviewing and I was producing. And he was interviewing just incredibly successful people, but people who had been through hard times, people who had struggled, who had hit rock bottom. And as we were doing that, we realized, wow, we really were drawn to that. My background is filmmaking. My husband's background is filmmaking. And so we said, like, we can either talk the talk or walk the walk. And if we really want to help people on a 360, then it means putting our money where our mouth is. So we respun the show and renamed it Impact Theory, because at the time it was inside Quest Nutrition. And the business partners, we just had different beliefs on what we were really trying to do. So we respun the show, and initially we had just intended it for us to be shooting in our house for about, probably a couple of months until we could find a studio. But that was 2.5 years later, 2.5 years ago, and we still have our set in our house and we shoot from our house.
Wow.
And that has been really life-changing, in seeing people coming in, like these incredible human beings that have come in, taking their time to come and shoot with us and discuss their hard times, has been transformational. And I've taken the role as being president of the company. My husband is CEO, and currently it is that the main, let's say, our bread and butter is the show, but we have bigger plans of building it into a studio where we're doing fiction and narrative content, which we've actually already started, and we've got a comic book out with Steve Aoki about empowerment.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it's kind of, I know that was a really long answer for one question,
no, that's great.
But yeah, our lives are very much dedicated to impacting people, and that's why we really called the company Impact Theory, because no matter what we do, we're always exploring. And I think as human beings, that is what we do, right? Once upon a time, we thought the Earth was flat, and in exploration, we realized it's not. So even with Impact, it's like we're all ever evolving, and so we thought that the name was very fitting.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for that explanation. Exciting to see where this is all headed, because you guys are already doing some great big things, and you got much bigger plans too. That sounds great. And by the way, I love the way you say studio.
Studio.
Well, I love. And by the way, on that note, let's talk a little bit about your background, because you're obviously from across the pond, as they say, in some parts of the world. Did you grow up in the UK?
I did. So I came from a very traditional Greek family background, born in the UK, and then came over to America when I was 21 for a very short period of time. I came just to study film for a 2-month intense course, and I ended up meeting my husband. So I've been here for a long time.
And so how did you meet your husband then? I mean, he was in the film. He had that background as well, sounds like.
Yeah, so I went to film school. My dream was to be the first female to ever win an Academy Award for directing.
Big dreams.
Bigelow beat me to it.
Yeah, she did. Big dreams, and I appreciate that you do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, at the time I was 16, and everyone was like, "Oh, your heads are in the clouds." But at the time I was like, "Well, I'm not hurting anyone, so I really want to study film." So I studied it, and by the time I graduated, I didn't feel like I really got enough actual hands-on experience. So I managed to persuade my dad to fund me, and I basically came to America for 2 months. And there was an intense film school in Los Angeles where you got to film behind the studio of Universal.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to use their sets.
Wow.
And I managed to convince Dad. I did a whole Excel spreadsheet of the pros and the cons of me coming to America for 2 months. And I walk in day one, and my teacher was my husband. He was this extremely hot American guy with big dreams and big aspirations, and so was I. And we were just crazy enough and naive enough to think that, why can't you have a long distance relationship? And we had no plans of being in a relationship. We both were like, this will be a great summer fling. And before we knew it, we fell head over heels with each other. And everybody thought we were crazy. And this has kind of been, I guess, a very common theme in our lives, where we always really followed our gut and followed our instincts, even despite all the people saying that we were crazy and what we were doing, and what do you know about America, and what do you know about living with an American, and you guys come from different worlds and different cultures, and then what do you know about protein bars? And so I've had that my whole life. And so Tom, and so I think that type of mindset we really bonded over, where we were always like, well, why can't we? Now, I definitely believe there's a massive opportunity for the naivety of the beginner. When me and my husband met, now I'm talking about, this is 19 years ago now. So there wasn't like, social media or video phones. It was phone calls that were very expensive and email. But even back then, we were just like, well, if we want it bad enough, we'll make it work. And that's really been a very common theme in our lives. Like the same with Quest. I mean, no, we didn't know, people were like, oh, you must have known everything about nutrition. It's like, the truth was, no, we didn't. We had business partners. One person specifically was very much into the nutrition world. One person was very much the guy that could figure anything out. So when our machines weren't working, he was the guy that would take the chainsaw to the machine and make it work. So everybody had their specialities, but at the same time, it really is like, when you look at yourself and say, how badly do you want it, and what are you willing to sacrifice? That was really like, no one can control that but you. And I always knew that I'm going to do whatever it took in the realm of my code of ethics. Obviously, I'm not willing to ever go across my morals or break my morals for success. But I was willing to say no to friends because I didn't want to spend money to go out. I was willing to not socialize. I was willing to give up date night with my husband while we were working, on Saturday at 3 a.m. in the morning on our business. That took a lot of sacrifice, and we had to buy into it together. And that's really what we did. But sorry, going kind of back to your question of like me being born in England. Yes, I was born in England. But yeah, my path has really pretty much taken me where it is because I wasn't willing to listen to anybody. And that doesn't mean that I haven't made mistakes. I've made many mistakes, but I just learned on the way.
Wow. Yeah, that's so. And you meet your husband, he's your teacher. There's no one gets in trouble then. You're no conflict of interest or any of that, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, so there was, it was 2 months. So the first month, I was actually there for 3 months. The first month, he never made one move on me. So I thought, okay, well, that's never, we're never going to happen. It's never going to happen. On the second month, we'd actually just finished our classes and we were in our final film stage. So technically he wasn't like, I didn't have any classes with him anymore. And look, at the same time at 21 for me, and, he was only 24 at the time, it was pretty damn exciting. It was, it was frowned upon. You're not supposed to be dating your teacher. You're not supposed to be dating your student. And at the time, neither of us took it seriously. So I obviously knew myself and knew that I would never be the sort of person that would ever try and use anything to against him. So even if it didn't work out, even if he was a total horrible human being to me on that first date, I would never tell his boss or anything. That's not my personality. So I didn't really worry about me getting in trouble. Now, he probably did on his end. I think it may have worked out okay for him, though.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. Now, and so what was it in your background? Anything in particular that made you want to go into film? Because for someone from the UK to come all the way to LA, that's a little different than someone from, Texas or Arizona in the US here. What was it in your background that drew you to LA to come pursue film this way?
Yeah, I think being in LA was almost incidental. It really was. Growing up, I loved film, and I loved the creation of film and the art behind it. And I never wanted to be in front of the camera. That was never a desire or dream of mine. I just really want to be behind and create and do things that could evoke an emotion. That was always really powerful to me. That I could put a certain type of music, I could light something in a certain way, and I could change somebody's mood on how they felt. So that was super interesting. I look at that type of thing in my own life, and I look at what do I do when I'm feeling down. I put on, fun music. I dance to myself, not like professionally. But all of these things, like I'll watch movies. Like if I'm in a romantic mood, I want, if I want to connect with my husband, I'll put on something romantic. And I get that that's for me, not for him, but I do. And so I just think that music and movies and things like that are just a beautiful way to enhance an emotion, create an emotion, emphasize an emotion. So I think growing up, I really loved that. And to be honest, I just looked and I was like, well, where do I have to be to do it? And so Los Angeles in America was just the place where it was. Yeah. And so because of that, I fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the place and the people and the culture. And I know a lot of people look at Los Angeles and be like, it's full of fake people. But I think that that's the case with anywhere. It's like, who do you choose to surround yourself with, right? Like if I chose to surround myself with the fake people, I'd know where to find them. And if I choose to surround myself with real people, I know where to find them. They're harder to find, but they are there. And so that ends up being that's a decision on me. That's not a decision on the state or the country or the city that I live in. So that's really how I ended up in Los Angeles. Now I have absolutely given myself over to this city. So I am, my blood flows Los Angeles.
Well, no, I couldn't agree. I've lived in Los Angeles myself, and I've lived here a couple times in my life. And it's a certain type of person to be in Los Angeles, because it can be a tough place to be. I mean, everything costs a lot and lots of traffic and all that kind of stuff. But, we can say... Go
London, though, those two things exist there as well.
Yeah.
Traffic and expense is a nightmare in London.
Yeah. No, I haven't been yet. I'd like to get over there. You and your husband can take me. I
think I might need someone to take me at this stage.
Such great people coming from. I mean, the people in the UK traditionally are very nice. I mean, did you find the people in LA or were kind of mean, or did you have to kind of adjust? Or were you kind of, was it like that? And because you say London, because that's the big city, was it kind of a big adjustment?
Again, I think it's like we blanket cities of like, this city's like that, this city's like this. And to be honest, like I just, for me, I go with where the good people are. I try to search for the good people that make me feel good, that I want to bring value to. And, growing up in London, I was from a very traditional Greek neighborhood. And so the culture, like that is something I actually miss, like being around. I just want to I love hearing the Greek language. And so you get a lot less of that here in Los Angeles where I live, but it's not like I couldn't seek it out. I could go to a Greek church. I could, join a Greek community if that was really important to me. But I absolutely love here, the diversity.
Yeah.
I love that, I am completely the opposite to someone like my husband, or my husband is completely the opposite to one of our teammates. Like I love that diversity because for me, that is where I grow, where people are showing me things that I've never seen before, or telling me things that I never thought before, or explaining a life I never even realized existed before. That for me is so impactful that I love to be around that. And in, where I was living, I was just one of many people that lived exactly like me, that had the same background than me, that and I felt like I was in looking back now, I feel like I was somewhat trapped in my perception and my perspective of life.
Yeah, well, interesting. And it sounds like you've embraced the fact that diversity is actually something that should empower us. A lot of folks maybe see it differently, that we better steer clear of this other type of person that's not me or my background. But it sounds like you embrace and even seek that out and see where, you with other people can complement each other's strengths and so on to bring the whole to a greater, bigger thing. So that's an interesting thing you're saying. And you said it's impactful. It goes along with impact theory, sounds like. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's I want to belong somewhere. So it's not that I'm seeking to be super uncomfortable and out of my norm and being like the odd one out and looking through, the window, like the puppy in the window. Like, it's not that. I feel like I belong in places where everyone's just accepting of everyone. And so I find that has been in places of diversity. growing up, like I said, my family, my father especially, had a very traditional mindset. And the thing is, I don't blame him. I don't judge him. Like when I was wanted to go to film school, actually, I had a massive fight with him because he didn't want me to study film. And eventually he just turned around to me and he just, in his big, thick Greek accent, he just said to me, well, it doesn't really matter. In a way, you're going to be a housewife, so your degree doesn't make a difference. Now,
Wow.
that sounds kind of mean, but the truth is if you understood where he came from, it is just his perspective on life. He was brought up in a tiny village in the mountains of Cyprus where my grandfather was a goat herder. So my dad had to be sent away to go to school at the age of 11. Like, there was no school in his village.
Wow.
So for him to get sent away at the age of 11, there were only a very limited amount of children from each village that got the opportunity to do that. Now, thinking again back to, like, even thinking about contraception wasn't available back then. So all the women in the village basically got pregnant and had kids. So his perspective growing up was that guys went and got education and the women stayed at home with their kids. So that perspective growing up myself was put upon me, and it was something that started to embed inside me. And again, like, looking back now, I don't blame my dad for it. It's just like my perspective now has been an accumulation of things that I've been through in my life, and the same with you, and the same with everybody listening.
Yeah.
The perspectives we hold right now are things that have been developed, things that were told when we were kids, the messages our parents told us, the friends we hung out with, the neighborhood we grew up in. It all develops a perspective that we then have. So I don't judge people for having a different perspective as I do. I just want to be welcomed for having that different perspective. And there are some places that absolutely will push you away if you don't have the same viewpoint and beliefs that they do. And there's other communities that embrace you. And so that's really where I come from. Like, I want to be in a place where I can be embraced no matter what my belief system is.
Wow. Great points. I mean, you're very eloquent in how you word it, and the British accent helps too. It helps it sound even more.
Thank you. Sometimes I joke to people, I'm really from Texas. I just do a great British accent.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Texas accent's pretty good too, but there's something about that British accent. Anytime we want to do something that's supposed to be olden times or anything else, they always put on the British accent.
It's so true. And it's always the Queen's English. It's always very posh.
Yeah. I thought it was funny in the movie Ever After, where it's supposed to be she's supposed to be French, but Drew Barrymore has to have a British accent. Just because it's olden times. But anyway, I digress. Same thing, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. Now, I want to talk now, when you were growing up, you talk about this film background. I love your upbeat attitude, by the way. It's contagious. Like, I can feel it through Skype right now. You might burn through the Skype lines here. But there's something about when people come up, I like to kind of find out who some of your heroes, now whether that be in acting or film or just humanitarian heroes or even fictional characters of some of the ideals that they bring to their character. Do you have any specific heroes in any of these realms or others that you could fill us in on?
Oh, yeah. So the very first person that came to mind was Princess Diana.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Growing up, obviously, in England, she made such a difference to our country, what we stood for, how I saw the royal family. She really, culturally, she was a massive shift in our culture in England. And then just growing up, it was, I didn't have much understanding of the Queen. I think from the outside, I kind of just heard a lot of noise about the Queen just sucks up, taxpayers' money. So I adopted that belief system, which I shouldn't have, but I absolutely did. And so when Princess Diana came along, and my mum's name was Diana, and my middle name is Diana, and she seemed so down to earth, it was like, wow, you can have a super powerful woman who can absolutely influence people with having such gracious demeanor. I mean, she was just, in every way she acted, spoke. She was gracious. That is the best word I can use to describe her. So
Yeah.
as a kid, I actually wrote to her,
Oh, wow.
and I asked for a photo. Yeah, I asked for a photo and her autograph because I loved her so much. So I was like, I really love you. Like, I'd love your autograph. And I got a letter from her lady in waiting, which is basically her secretary or her assistant. And I had that letter. I kept that very precious letter just as a symbol of like, her lady in waiting knew who I was. And then, so like really that was very powerful for me. Growing up also, Jodie Foster was a huge influence in my film love and desire, because I saw her, you know, she was very famous as a young actress. And then you see her career and her evolution from going from, you know, just natural fame of being in front of the camera to using that strength and power behind the camera to get projects greenlit, to get producing roles, to get directing roles. So as a young adult, I realized the power that a woman can have from one thing and using it across other platforms. So like I said, she was a very famous actress, but she used that to do movies and get things greenlit that she really believed in. That was very powerful to me. And to see that a woman didn't have to show off her boobs or be uber sexual in order to gain power in Hollywood. Like that was really strong for me growing up. I did my whole dissertation on Jodie Foster in filmmaking. So those are the two that really, really stand out. And it's funny because I never really processed, I think, the exact reasons until just now.
Yeah.
Like having to put words to feelings. And this is why I actually love doing interviews and I love writing, because it really does get clarity to things that you may not have even considered, because you just go by your gut, right? Oh, it feels right. I love Jodie. She's great. She's an amazing director. You know, I love Princess Diana, but having to put it into words really does codify things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll take credit for that one at least.
Yeah.
We cleared your mind in one area a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. But now that's interesting, and as I sit and hear you talk, and have heard some of your other things in the past, you speak with a level of confidence that I think maybe I'm not a woman, but I think some women might find a little foreign, because what I understand and in my association with women have a hard time sometimes with confidence. And maybe you don't always have confidence, but when you talk about sending a letter to Princess Diana with confidence, some people might have not even thought, oh, I could even get an autograph. Now, granted, you didn't, but you tried. Or that you could be the first female to win the Best Director Oscar and stuff like that. I mean, these are big dreams. And what do we have to say to women out there, or any perspective on what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I mean, so thank you for saying that. So a big thing for me is I was I don't even know what the words are. I was the least confident person I knew growing up. I got picked on. I was very paranoid of my nose. I got called Concord when I was at school. I had a head brace. I had the mouthful of metal braces with elastic bands. So my confidence was zero. I had the unibrow. My sister was super popular in school, very pretty. My brother was super popular in school, very handsome. And there I was. So I didn't have any confidence growing up.
Yeah.
But I always had, I was always, what's the word? Just obnoxious enough to not let it stop me.
Obnoxious.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if obnoxious is the right word, but like I was just telling my husband the other day, I was dyslexic. I still am, I guess. Have certain issues with certain letters of the alphabet, and it's one of these things. It's been in me, and so I just kind of think of it as the way it is. But I was still the person in school that would put my hand up every time a teacher said, "Who wants to read out loud?" Now, here I am, really low confidence. I feel terribly about myself. I put my hand up and put the spotlight on me, only to get them made fun of. And I would go home crying. It wasn't like it didn't affect me emotionally. Like, I was devastated. But I'm not sure why I just kept putting my hand up. I think in hindsight now, it's really a reflection of what I believe about failure. Is that you're going to fail. You're going to fall on your floor. But man, if I can learn from it, that's where my confidence built. So I didn't I used to pride myself on like trying to be right or trying to look cool and being like the person that was always, oh, I'm cool too. And then I realized that isn't sustainable. That's never going to be able to be my life. I'm just not cool like that. So what if I changed my perspective? And this really started, I think, as Quest started developing. So this became, in my older years. So in my 20s, I was still extremely insecure. Like I said, I never wanted to be in the front of the camera. I would never do interviews like this ever. I never thought I was articulate. And then I took myself. So I actually was a housewife for 8 years. And then when my husband came home one day and said, hey, would you mind helping with this protein bar company that me and my business partners want to start? I just thought, sure, I'll be a great supportive wife and I'll help him. And so it was that actually started my entrepreneurial career. It wasn't I had confidence in like, yes, I can do it. I was like, of course I'll help my husband. And at the time we decided to put our house on the line. So if Quest didn't succeed, we would have lost our house. So when my husband came home to me and asked for help, I had that weighing on me. And so every time something new came up, so we were growing so quickly, we grew at 57,000% year after year for 3 years. And so that growth, that growth took me from literally shipping bars from my living room floor and walking them to the post office. Within 2 years, I had a department of 40 employees. That's 40 employees underneath me. We were shipping out $80 million in revenue. Now, think about that for a second. I'm a super insecure housewife. And when I say housewife, I didn't feel like I chose to be a housewife. I feel like I kind of slipped into that role. And so I want to make sure that people hear me when I say housewife. It's not a negative thing if that's what you want in life. If that's what you choose to be and desire, then that's freaking amazing. I just didn't choose it. I kind of stumbled into it and then just stayed there for 8 years. So I really want to emphasize that, and that's why it's important to me that I was able to evolve and become something that I wanted to become. But I was insecure and I didn't have any clue what I was doing. I didn't even know how to use a computer. So when I'm like having to learn how to print an order, I'm like, oh God, I froze. I was like, I don't know what to do. But it got to the point where there was no other choice. Or in fact, there was a choice. The choice was, don't print orders, don't figure it out, Lisa, and then your company ceases to exist and you lose your house. So those were my choices. Find out, figure it out, learn, fall on your face, get back up, get better at it, fall on your face again. But it was still like every time I did that, I got one little like notch on my belt, if you will, that I got better, that I learned something new. And that's where I started to self-reinforce the fact that, falling on your face actually isn't a problem if you learn from it, because now I'm more powerful for it. I'm that one bit better for it. And so I started to change my mindset on what I perceived as change my mindset on looking at myself and seeing what I saw. Before, I just used to think, you don't know much, you get picked on, you're not good enough, you don't know what you're talking about. To then I changed the perspective of, I may not know it yet, but I could if I wanted to. And I may not know how to do that yet. Like the second I'm on the phone to GNC, right, multi-billion-dollar company, I'm on the phone and I'm trying to figure out how on earth I'm doing freight with them. I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's, well, I've got a choice, going back to the choices, right? I've got a choice. Don't figure it out. Lose your house, lose the company, or ask every question you possibly can. Face looking stupid, because that's very possible. Maybe people thought I was stupid. They probably did. Face the fact that I don't know anything, but that I am about to learn. And in 1 or 2 or 3 days, no one's going to be able to take that away from me. And so I just shifted my perspective of who I was. I shifted my perspective of what I was capable of. And that was how I built my confidence. And that is how I've gotten to be the person I am today. It's not that I'm not confident. It's that there are many times I'm like, oh, dear Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's like, that's okay. And giving myself the permission that it's okay. And giving myself the permission to go in and just tell people, guys, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But you know what? You can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
And now I can approach the learning with confidence. I can't approach knowing with confidence because I don't know anything yet.
Yeah.
And so once I shifted that, I started to believe it. So once I started to believe it, I started to embody it. Once I started to embody it, you hear it in the way that I speak, the nuances, the way I emphasize certain words, because I truly believe that now.
Yeah.
But every day I had to remind myself of that.
Wow. And that's an interesting process you're talking about, to get to a place where you can embrace the process of success, because some people get overwhelmed and they don't even want to start. But you got to this place where you took certain burdens off yourself and realized, I am going to fail. And when I fail, it's almost like you made everything, the pleasant and unpleasant parts, all positive regardless. That, okay, we're going to take something positive from anything and everything, even when we fall on our face and make a mistake. And then that kind of kept fueling you along, because it sounds like for the most part you found where some positive could be derived from every circumstance. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly it, is that you really can. Tony Robbins says, how do you take the worst day and make it the best? It is all about perspective.
Yeah.
It is, how are you looking at something? Are you looking at something saying, poor me? Like, let's just even take my digestion. So I've been dealing with health issues for about 4 years now. The first year that my health really got bad, I was losing my hair. I couldn't gain weight. My nails were falling out. I had foggy brain. I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I was still building Quest at the time. So my health was at its worst when I was at my busiest. Now I could look at that and say, why me? Oh my God, my health. I could use every excuse and reason under the sun why I'm not going to work, but that's a reason that I'm given. Or going back to the Tony Robbins thing, I can say, how can this be the best thing that's ever happened to you, Lisa? While I'm still in bed and suffering, I'm asking myself that question, because perspective is everything.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe that this happened to me. Why me? Well, how am I going to feel? I'm going to feel like the victim. I'm going to feel like I'm out of control, that I don't have control over my own life. I'm going to feel weak. And so I just look at myself and say, is that how I want to feel? Yes or no? And the answer is no, I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to feel like I'm out of control of my feelings, my emotions, and my day. So I'm like, okay, well, what perspective can I adopt that's going to be empowering?
Yeah.
So with my health, it is like, wow, okay, Lisa, this sucks, but what you're learning right now is things that you can help somebody else. That, 16-year-old person, or that 16-year-old girl that's out there right now that is making poor decisions on food for looks. Okay, maybe my experience now can help her.
Yeah.
All right. That's powerful.
Yeah.
If I can help one person not go through what I'm going through, that's freaking strong.
Yeah.
And so I lean into it.
Yeah.
And I deliberately lean into it. It's not like I want to lean into it. It's not like it feels normal. It doesn't feel right. But I just say, what would leaning into this look like? It would be talking out loud. It would be speaking up about it. It would be, taking a photo and posting it on Instagram while I'm in bed. Like, things like that don't feel good in the moment, but I focus on what I'm achieving, and then that makes me feel good. So like, it really does come back to perspective, and how do you want to see the world that you exist in? Yeah.
Well, and that's powerful. Everything you're saying is very, very powerful. And I think of it in the context of what you're doing with this Women of Impact, because I look at women and kind of marvel at everything women have to go through just to be women. And, going a step further to be a wife and maybe a mother and all these things. It's like women deserve a gold medal every day just for getting up and being women. And I don't mean that in any disingenuous or condescending or any kind of way. I mean it just totally sincerely. And yet, what is it about our society that's dragging women down so much as far as the body image and the confidence, and then maybe women amongst women kind of with each other? I don't know. I can't comment about this whole, you might use the word catty thing that happens sometimes. All these things that go on. It sounds like you got kind of your work cut out for you but you have such a great perspective. I feel like you could be the chosen one to lift women so much from what I'm hearing you in this interview and the other things I've heard. But what is it about our society? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please continue. I've loved everything you're saying.
Well, I could go on and on and on. I mean, for me personally, I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't have my mom around for a whole. I won't get into all those reasons, but and so it was just boys, and so in certain way, I kind of learned some things, but also didn't get some of the perspective that I've kind of learned from adulthood. Both in making mistakes and not that women are just powerful creatures and haven't always been given that power by society. And I love that we're in this place where so many, groups that haven't been empowered before can be now, between women and races and the different marriage ideals. And we can get political about anything here, but we're in a powerful time between the internet and social media. So what is it about this whole thing that you're trying to do? Because I look at these videos and podcasts, you have titles like Happiness is a Choice, You're Beautiful, Own It, Let It Go, Accept Yourself, all kinds of things about just being happy. Silence the negative voice. I mean, is being a woman yourself, how hard is this growing up and becoming an adult as a woman?
Yeah, great question. So Women of Impact, the show, really grew from, it was kind of accidental. I mean, it really was. I had grew up in, the background that I had, and I met Tom, my husband, and we were dirt poor, and, I was a housewife for 8 years, and then we built $1 billion company together, and all these are chapters in my life, but none of it was like thinking ahead, right? Even now with what we're doing, as we're talking, right? It is part of a goal. So I'm sure for you, each interview you do is another notch on your belt to build your brand and build your podcast and, get bigger. But sometimes certain things come our way that we're not expecting. And if it feels right, then I always say, go with it. So for me, I had no intention, I'm going to go back to that, no intention of ever being in front of the camera. I'd never intention of public speaking. I was always behind the scenes. My husband's amazing at it. I love creating behind the scenes. So it was never even an urge that I had until we started Impact Theory. And I would just start to talk on like my Instagram or with friends or with, influencers that I would meet, and people would ask me questions and I would answer, just telling my life story. And through kind of what I said earlier, and through telling my story, I started to realize all the things I had battled with and didn't even realize. Yeah. I started to realize that my own worst enemy was me. It was the negative thoughts that I had about myself. It wasn't even about other women. And until I realized that, from the outside, I could have absolutely said, oh, women judge me and that's why. It's like, no, you freaking judge yourself, Lisa. And then you put other people's or your perspective of what other people are going to think of you. Yeah. You've created that as well. And so all these videos, the interviews that I do, the subjects that I now talk about are just things that I've discovered myself having done. And realize that, wow, if someone had pointed this out to me, a year ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, what more things could I have done with my life instead of getting caught up in my confidence and my ego? Now, look, that's not to say that I don't still do battle with it. Of course I do. I absolutely, on days that I'm not feeling well, I definitely sometimes play the victim in my head, like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? Yeah. Sometimes when I'm in a business meeting and my husband is my business partner and people turn to him instead of to me. And I'm just like, I can't believe they turn to him. And it's like, no, it's still the world that we live in where naturally people still turn to him over the woman. And instead of getting annoyed and pissed off about it, that's not going to solve anything. I just go, okay, well, how can I change that story? How can I change that behavior? And how can I be part of the solution? And I just think that that's now something that we're starting to talk about in society with women. Like, women are now, which I love, are starting to empower each other. And this is definitely something that I've developed into. When I was younger, at the age of 15, 16, I absolutely saw women as the enemy. And when I don't mean like that in a dramatic way, but it's like if there was, a boy at the time, a boy that I fancied or something, I would see the girl next to me as being competition because she was way prettier than me. And so if she was way prettier, the guy's going to go after her. So what does that say about me, right? Then I start playing that negative loop in my head of that I'm not good enough.
And is it easy to get lost in that whole thing? I'm sorry to interrupt, but women and men, I think, kind of tend to think a little bit differently, at least stereotypically we do. But is it easy to kind of get lost in some thought as far, because I do some research with mindfulness where they talk about don't let your thoughts carry you to these crazy places. You can have a thought and you can still be present and maybe control. But go ahead. Is it easy to get kind of carried away like that when you start having these thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, absolutely, because, look, we all have chemicals that are pumping through our body telling us, a message. And so sometimes it's, the victim message, sometimes it's the insecurity message. Mm-hmm. And I've come to recognize it is chemicals in my body. And so what I do that I have found personally very useful for myself is every time I'm in some form of like loop of negativity or self-doubt or anything, I just remind myself, and it's very on a intellectual level, so I have to disconnect my heart from my mind, and I just say to myself, Lisa, the chemicals in your body right now are telling you should be sad, or you should be upset, or you should feel threatened by another pretty woman, let's say. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and it is just the chemicals that are trying to trick you into believing this. Yeah. And so what do I know about myself? And then back then I would have certain affirmations, or I would put post-it notes everywhere. I do alarms on my phone that I call my alarm roulette. So I kind of spin it and don't look to see when it's going to go off. And I just press save. And so every day I'll have a alarm go off in my phone with a message for me. And I change up the message on different weeks, but it catches me off guard. And I love that. It's like, we actually had a guest on one of our shows, and they said it's kind of like, when you're really mad and you're having an argument with someone and you feel so validated and you're so pissed and you're just furious and, you just can't come down, and then the phone rings and you have to answer. Well, how do you act? How do you change? Like, so when people are like, oh, I can't calm down, it's going to take me days. It's like, no, that's actually BS. When the phone rings, if it's someone important or someone that you have to, like, say it's your boss or someone, you change it on a heartbeat, right? Now, why? How can that thought interrupt your emotions? It can. Yeah. Because your mind is telling you, shit, you can't behave like that when you pick up the phone. Uh-huh. You can't start swearing at the person on the other end of the phone. Yeah. So if you can do it, why aren't we able to do it when, let's say, we're just in a regular argument and we face to face with our spouse or something? Yeah. It's because we haven't programmed ourselves yet.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I just you're not programmed yet. And I mean that in the best way possible, because I absolutely listen to what I'm feeling. So it's not that I just shove it under the rug, because that I've tried to do that before as well, and that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I just acknowledge it, and I'm like, all right, you're feeling really frustrated now, or you're feeling really insecure. Like you're needing, let's say, I keep asking my husband questions about my outfit. And, let's say he then snaps at me and he's like, just choose whatever. And I get upset. I'm like, okay, well, why are you upset? Because right now he wasn't rude to you. He wasn't, obnoxious. He didn't call you names. You didn't get into a fight. So why am I upset? I'm upset because he wasn't giving me an answer. Okay, well, why does that bother me? Okay, it bothers me because I just want to know what he thinks makes me look good. Well, why do I care about what makes me look good? Maybe because I want to be uplifted. Well, why do I want to be uplifted? I'm actually feeling down on myself. Well, why am I feeling down on myself? And so I've unraveled this whole thing of, let's say I'm having an argument with my husband because I felt like he was mean to me. And what I've realized is that I'm just really insecure right now.
It's good to be in tune with those things, and I'm glad you're finding a place to process these things, and then of course expound that to the rest of the world as well. And my gosh, and by the way, I've been taking notes while we're talking. I could go on and talk to you probably for hours, and maybe we'll do a sequel too. But I want to talk to you a little bit about, because you mentioned your husband several times, and I've seen you post several things about your relationship. And I saw something the other day where you said when you're new in a relationship and maybe you really like this person, and then having the conversation to say, you know what, I like being with you, and it seems like you do too. But in order for us to get to this next place, there's some things that, from my end at least, that we need to see happen, that I feel. And these conversations can be a hard thing to do, just like this inner conversation about looking at the external things, then finally, like you said, looking at yourself and realizing that you're your own worst enemy, and so on. But how does this play out? Because you've been married, sounds like, for a while now. In a marriage setting, how do we do this in a healthy manner?
I'm going to give you a cheesy answer, but it is the truth of the truth.
Uh-huh.
It is utter 100% honesty with your communication. So there's kind of three things that I threw in there: honesty, 100%, and communicate. I don't even lie to my husband if he says to me, like, for instance, I'm trying to think of something like, hey, how does this outfit look? If it looks terrible, I'm going to say, babe, that looks absolutely hideous. If I know he's feeling, let's say, vulnerable, or there's something going on, and I know, oh, if I tell him this right now, it's going to upset him, I still tell him. We don't couch things with each other. Now, look, you have to do it in the most sweetest, empathetic way you possibly can. You're not just going to be like, oh, you look terrible today. You know, like you have to word things in a nice way, but we are always very honest with each other, like, especially because we're business partners. So we'll have to tell each other when we're not doing a good enough job. Like, I don't think you're pulling your weight here on, those things are very hard to say to each other. And it all comes down to the very first discussion you have with your partner about what your life is going to look like, and do you both agree with it? And having that conversation every year. So for Tom and I, it was, okay, well, how we want to make movies. Okay, how do we want to make movies? Okay, we're going to have to finance it ourselves because we both worked on films and hated the industry. So we said, all right, if we still want to make movies, how are we going to do it? Okay, we have to finance. All right, do we both agree that we're going to both finance the movie? Yes. All right, now we both agree. How are we going to do it? All right, so the discussion was he was going to go out, he was going to make money and be an entrepreneur. Okay, so where does that leave me? All right, so we had the discussion, the no BS discussion of, if he's going out to be the best entrepreneur he possibly can be, what are the things we need to pay attention to? So we looked at Steve Jobs, we looked at all the really high level players and said, how did they achieve what they achieved? Now, this is back when we were living in a 700 square foot apartment. We barely had a penny to scrape to our name. So we're looking around and we're like, how do they do it? And so we looked at Steve Jobs and we said, okay, he always wears the same color t-shirt. And if you hear his story, the reason is that we as humans have a certain amount of decisions that we can make with clarity in a day. So if we have, let's say, I can't remember the number, but let's say we have 20 decisions that we can make with utter clarity. And then after that, they start to degrade. So if you have to make a decision on what you're going to eat for today, that's one decision. If you have to decide on what you're going to wear today, that's another decision. So by the time you get to work, you've probably got, 10 decisions left. So we said, all right, well, if we really want to play at this entrepreneurship game, that means you can only make decisions that are going to benefit the family and going to bring in money. So as a team, we decided I was going to stay at home and do everything else. I was going to pay bills. I was going to put clothes out for him. He would literally wake up. His gym clothes were waiting for him. He would get back from the gym. His work clothes were waiting for him, along with his breakfast and lunch.
Wow.
So that's how deep we went. Now, I didn't ever get resentful with my husband for being a housewife. Why not? Because he didn't force me to. We both went in it together. And we both went in it with the agreement that was how we were going to live our lives.
Right.
So whatever your situation is with your partner, have you both bought into the decision that you've made of your life? So if it's we're going to have kids, are you both bought into having children? If the answer is yes, okay, the next step is, have you bought into what your life looks like? Because the argument I hear from a lot of couples is from the woman, it's maybe my husband doesn't, put enough time in for me. He comes home and he spends it with the children. Or it's from the guy, my wife does, is always with the kids and she doesn't make an effort for me. Well, have you guys even discussed that? And that's a discussion me and my husband had when we were talking about having kids. We said, all right, what does Monday look like? Just like a regular Monday. What does it actually look like? And when we had that discussion, when I started getting into business, it was like, okay, well, if I want to work, I'd have to have a nanny. Do we both agree that a nanny is a good option or a bad option? On a Monday night, all right, my husband he works, no joke, from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed, Monday to Friday. So we don't eat together. We pass each other while we're brushing our teeth in the morning. Like, that's how we've committed to our lives being.
Wow.
And again, we're bought into it. We're like, all right, are we willing to sacrifice social time in order to build this business? yes, okay, again, what does that mean? And so we went through a pattern of what does Monday look like in our life? What does a Saturday look like? So he was very honest and said, the one thing you can never ask me to do is give up my ambition. And it's not that he's not willing to do it, because he's like, I'd be willing to give up anything for you. But here's the truth. If he gave up the one thing that was utterly important to him, who would he end up being as a human being? He would lose himself. Okay, well, hang on a minute. Aren't I married to him because I love who he is?
Yeah.
So now I'm asking him to give up something that for him is a defining part of his characteristic. So who is he going to be as a husband if I ask him to give that up? So I can't ever ask him to give that up for me or my children, because that's not fair. I wouldn't want him to ask for me to give something up that was fundamental as, a person. So, okay, well, if he's not going to give up his ambition and his lifestyle, so think about what that looks like if we had children. He comes every night, maybe he's got 30 minutes left and he spends it with them. So where does that leave me as a wife? I was his number one. And we've said, he's my number one and I'm his number one. But once you have kids, he becomes my number two. He becomes my number three. And now you need to have that discussion. Do I want to be my husband's number two or number three? And that's hard. And that's why I said you have to be 100% honest and you have to communicate. Yeah. And I turned to him and I was like, I don't want to be your number two. I don't want to be your number three. I don't want to have to compete with you coming home from work and then spending time with the children. Because the truth is, I would want him to spend time with the kids. When I look at what the selfish thing is I would want from a father of my children, that I want him to spend it with my children.
Yeah.
But there's another part of me that wants me to be his number one. So how do they both coexist? I personally don't see a world where those two can both coexist. So I was honest and he was honest back and he said, I don't think I want children because I'm not willing to sacrifice this and that. And I said the same. And so that's actually how we came to the conclusion of us not having children. Yeah. Because he said, if you want kids, I will absolutely be there. I will be there for the kid, but you will become my number two and you're going to have to deal with the children. And it's not like he's being horrible. He's just being honest. And he's like, you're going to have to be the disciplinarian of the children Monday to Friday. Yeah. Is that what you want? And I had to take a hard look and say, no, that isn't what I want. But until you have those conversations, until you create an environment with your partner where you can sit down with them and be 100% honest with them with no judgment, because that's important. Yeah. If I was worrying what my husband would think of me as a woman, if I said I didn't want kids, I'd never be able to say it out loud. Yeah. And then where would I be? Maybe I'd have kids, is the truth.
Wow. And there's so much courage that goes into that approach to life. I mean, and I'm taking notes still. I literally am I've got a pen, the old school way. I'm taking notes because it's like you're teaching me too. And also stuff that we're talking about. And I know we're short on time, and my goodness, and I'm not lying. I could go another 3-4 hours and people would probably get bored of me, but just be ecstatic that you stayed on this long. But I know you got places to go and things to do, but as we hear this, I mean, I'm hearing you talk about mutual respect. I hear you talk about clarifying expectations, communicating, and that's its own communication. We could talk for hours about just how different people communicate and how I saw something even just today on social media that said that the only validation you need is parking. And it said that some people, including me, sometimes feel like we need validation and certain things of communication. But it sounds like it would be important to, if you could, depending on your relationship with somebody, or even just friends sometimes, to have kind of a set, maybe once a week on a Sunday or something, take 15 minutes or 2 hours if you need to talk about these are expectations. This is what we're planning for the week. This is what I need in our relationship. This is where we're evolving together. And maybe those just happen in passing as you go throughout the weeks of life as well. But it sounds to me like maybe that could be a beneficial thing to do just based on what you're saying, just so that everybody's got everything out in the open on the same page and addressing and compromising, as you go. What are your thoughts?
And that's, 100%. And the biggest key is that no one's right and no one's wrong. And that is,
wow.
I mean, if people can hold on to one message, one thing from this interview, is that your partner's opinion and perspective of life isn't right or wrong. It's just different to yours. So even when I sit with my husband, even now when we go over things, we disagree a lot. It's not like we're the same person. I mean, like I said, we run a business together as well, and we disagree all the time. But neither of us is making the other person feel inferior, or that they're wrong, or that they're, stupid for thinking like that, or their emotions. Because that's another thing, is that when you start making people feel like their emotions are wrong, like, you shouldn't feel like that. It's like, well, no, the fact is they do feel like that. So should or shouldn't, the fact is they do. Now the question is, why do they feel like that? And how do you together as a team unravel that? And that's really what me and my husband do. Like, there are times that I think his opinion is so the opposite to mine, and I'll be like, oh my God, you're crazy. But ultimately he knows I'm not actually saying he's crazy. I'm just like, wow, that is so the opposite to what I think. Please explain it to me. And here's the thing, I may never agree with him. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
And that's like, we'll say like, look, I actually don't agree with you, but I 100% respect where you're coming from. And that's a key. If you can leave any disagreement with saying, you know what, I still don't agree with you, but I absolutely respect where you come from.
Wow.
And if you need me to do X, Y, and Z to show you the respect, then I'm willing to, even if I don't agree with it. Like that will be things that we'll do as well, because it comes, I'm just going to repeat myself now, but it does come down to stop judging each other.
Yeah.
Stop. I used to do it all the time. I absolutely did. So I'm coming from a place of a person that used to do it and was able to reverse that and come out of that. The same with my husband. Like, we have been able to unravel it. And you actually said something earlier, which is like, hopefully these discussions come about. I just learned that they don't, at least for me and my husband, they don't naturally come about. We have to create the space to address an issue. And that's just me and him, but we actively need to be deliberate in making sure that we have the conversations that we that are certain things that are weighing on our minds, because I also think that eventually whatever's weighing on you will come out, and the chances are it's going to come out in an argument, and that's when you're catching the other person off guard. So if you can avoid doing that, and you can say like, hey, look, something's really on my mind, I'd love to talk to you about it, use them as a teammate instead of as an opponent. Right? It's like, I think of a sport. It's like they're on your same team. It's not tennis. They're not standing across the other side of the net, and they're not your opposition. They're your teammate. You're passing the ball to them so that you can score and win as a collective. And that's how I see my husband. Every problem that I have, even if my problem is with him, I see, all right, he's my teammate, and together we're going to get through this. And that's how I approach it. And I think that approaching things in that way allows the other person to let their guard down, instead of being defensive. Because when someone that you really love comes at you and says that you've upset them, the first thing you do is put your defenses up, because you don't want to feel the pain of having to face that you've upset them. But if someone comes to you with like, hey, I've actually got something I'd love to talk to you about, this really will mean a lot to me, I think that together we can really overcome this. All right, well, now you're setting me up to feel like I'm a part of the solution, and we're doing it together. So
well, everything you're saying is so powerful, and I want that to sink in for all of us. And you talk about expectations, so expecting that we're going to have differences of opinion. You say no one's right, no one's wrong. And I remember Dr. Phil one time said, I honestly haven't watched Dr. Phil a ton. Love you, Dr. Phil, but I've only watched him a few times. And one of the things I got from one of his episodes was, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And whether people are married or not, or just in a relationship with people, you talk about valuing the differences. These are common threads I hear about from successful people. You don't try to butt heads with the differences. We find ways to value and bring ourselves all to a higher level. And so both from an intimate relationship to business to friendships, it sounds like there's some powerful principles there. And again, we're going to have to do a sequel one of these days. But so Women of Impact, kind of a powerful branch of the impact theory movement, is also available through at Women of Impact and at Lisa Bilyeu, both on Instagram. You've got the Women of Impact YouTube channel and podcast, and Lisa, I can't say enough good things. I'm impressed as heck with you and your husband, and I'm honored, by the way, very honored to have been able to have you on our podcast here at Empower Humans. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up here, Lisa?
Not at all, Phil. I just want to say thank you so much for having me on and building this platform where you're looking to empower humans. I absolutely love that. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And to all your listeners.
Great. Hopefully we can collaborate in some capacity maybe down the road too. But until next time, for our audience, and with utmost gratitude to Lisa and her husband and her whole team over there, for all of you, our audience, empower yourself, empower the world around you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Empower Humans. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review this podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit empowerhumans.com. We'll catch you next time.